Hello everybody. Okay, it's a magical day. I am going to talk and explain what's all in a release warp gate because it's kind of crazy as to how much it does. And I keep getting asked, well, what's in it? What's in it? I feel we're doing all this stuff, but what's all in it? So I'm going to do my best to explain all what's in a release warp gate. Kind of like the main focus is massively accelerating ascension by removing codependent entanglements, right? That's kind of like the global. That's what the release warp gate is doing. When we break it into a little bit, let's go. First part is kind of like just like joint and muscle tension. Like it's just a place in where there is a non-connection to source, if that makes sense. So we go through and like it clears all different parts of, like first it starts off with like, you know, requesting divine blessings. This is just that one component, right? And the key thing is that this warp gate does this at each of your ages. So it's going to go through, like, so if we did release everything that's safe to be safe, you know, connecting to my mom, first it would go in at age 1, right? And it's going to go through this whole process at age 1, all these different clearings, and then go back. And it's going to check as age 1 clear. Otherwise, we'll do it again. And then go to age 2, and then age 3, and age 4. So you can just see from that, just going through all your ages. Even if we just did like simple, like, you know, we're asking for blessings, and we're gonna go through all, like, some of the things is like all the bears, layers, and clock that like connect to that safe to be safe, right? And then we're gonna do like all the curses, damnations, sentences, implants, and explants. This is kind of access speak from access consciousness. It's part of what's in the warp gate. And then like the stuff that you've misidentified, misapplied. Like, so as of being a light, you know, all of a sudden you misidentified, misapplied about safety that you got from your mom at age 1. And we're gonna clear it at age 2, age 3, age 4, age 5, age 6, like, as you can see. And then all the things you line with, the read with, resist to, react to, that's another version. And then kind of clearing up when those clears, like Mobius strips, quantum particulates, free radicals, positive negative ions, like that, hold that in place, magnetic imprinting. We're gonna go through and sweep all that out the way. And then we'll also bring in some other practices of, like, once we've cleared that, got it out, then we kind of paint it with gold, like kind of bringing love and gold and light into that to like kind of heal whatever part we happen to be working on at the time at that age. And that's just one part. It's kind of like the warp gates have, that's like one version of that. Like this is one kind of performance team or warp gate I created. It's kind of these all get nested together. Then the next part is like after, and this is kind of a happy relations team, and it's clean up connections between each other and add love and kindness to that. So we just pulled out some of that energy work, some of those chains, some of those, like, you know, shadow lines, shadow systems, and clears that stuff, like all these things that we just pulled out at that one age related to like safe to be safe, that's what we queued up the warp gate with. Then we're gonna clear the projections that happened there. We're gonna clear all the curses. We're gonna then also send love of like, hey, look, you know, we kind of had this interaction, right? This two-way chain, and I'm gonna send love to you, you know, and send caring and love to kind of clean up that interaction that happened. Then we're also gonna clear up karma that was created from that interaction. Then we're gonna do like a kind of self-correct to see, okay, now we've done that. How does that look? Like, does that look like we've cleared what our intention was at that age? Say it was age 1, or like, okay, does it look like we've cleared that up? And then also, if there's still stuff to be done, or once that's cleared and we've done it, like looped a couple times, it's kind of like taking the nugget of how can we turn that interaction, that creation of a change into a win-win. A win-win for both parties. And the two chains are like, hey, we entered into this chain. It wasn't the best for both of us. Now we've removed it. We've also sent love, or at least you sent love, right? Or sending love. And then also looking, okay, how can we make that a win that it happened? Like what was the divine kind of like path that created that? And that's the second part of the team. And then this other part is, because we're letting go of stuff in the past, this one, or this part, or this team, like a component of the warp gate, is to bring in extreme joy. Also, then bring in a stillness so you kind of see it as, like, you know, from a still place. Also, bring in God's guidance, see of like, you know, what's the God's guidance in this step, and then also see what God is God. You know, what was God trying to give us from this part there, and then also reconnecting with your soul to kind of like, because it was all part of this, all this dynamic. And we're kind of just rewiring that all back up. So that part that we clear now kind of gets pulled really into that divine path and like kind of gets us on. I mean, because we're always on our divine path, but kind of like cleans it up to where it's a more joyous divine path, if that makes sense. So that's the next part of the release. Get the next thing low. Ooh, this is a good one. And this kind of like really some of the name came from was vibration shift. And this one's to create vibrational flexibility, because a lot of it's not like, life's not about like, oh, I'm just going to be in extreme joy. It's the ability to transition from the different emotions with freedom, right? So you can go into like happiness, and then into joy, and then into love, and then possibly into anger, and then back into joy, and then to because anger is going to be generating to take an action. There might be an immediate action you need to take, and anger is the perfect emotion to like allow you to do that. So you want to be able to have that flexibility to like go through the different emotions and through different energies, right? Because you could be in like a really high vibration place and get that like really high vibration, as opposed to if you kind of got a lot of stuck spots and you get to a high vibration place, it's gonna feel bad. Versus if you're kind of like that high vibration vibe and you go to a stuck place or low vibration, it's gonna feel bad. As opposed to having the flexibility of whatever area you're at, you can resonate or vibe or be in joy in that place, to where, okay, this place is like a low vibration or slow vibration. It's like, okay, cool, I can find the magic in the slow vibration. I have this vibrational flexibility. That's what this team's really good, is to help bring that in of like, we just done this clearing at this age one and clear all that stuff up. It's like, well, how can we also now have vibrational flexibility? Because it's kind of like future pacing of like, instead of if that situation occurred, we rechain, we would be able to, be vibrational flexible as to like, okay, the energy came up, I took it in and I let it go, as opposed to chain, warning, fight, So part of this thing is it monitoring the connection to source, and reconnecting, okay, reconnecting source, and then being calm, like the calm under an ocean. So like an ocean, the top is rippling, but underneath it's calm. So like getting back into calm, and then tuning up the emotional meter to where it's like, because a lot of times emotions get like tweaked as to like how much, and then it gets stuck. And it's like, this is a perfect time, because we just cleared it up and we can really like kind of process those emotions and see where, it's like, oh man, we went way into fear, as opposed to like have a little fear taking action. It's like, bam, we pegged it. And it's like, okay, let's tune up the meter. When we get the input, we just respond to the input, as opposed to, fly off the handle. So it's a perfect place to kind of check that, tune it up. And then also I want to reinforce that dynamic energy flexibility of like, how do we be less rigid? Kind of like same if like if you were to punch me, right? And I'm like, and I just take it. But if you were like to, kind of like just flow with it, just let it flow through. That's what this part is doing. And then adjusting to the energy change. So it's also kind of like, we've got a whole new dynamic and how to tune and adjust of like, we made a big change to also be flexible that this new change has come in. And it's not like, throwing a rock into an ice pond that just then shatters stuff. It's just kind of like, how do we encourage that flexibility? And then another part, this was one of the later ones that came in, and it's removing inculcated demonic entities and programs. So because we're going into a deep chain. We're going kind of really fine, really tuning in. It's kind of see where things that should not have been planted in there got planted. So we'll do an extra set of clearings to look for them, because they have some level of volition, and they're also gonna want to hide. So they kind of like, so it's kind of like we're doing an extra shine of light and being like, okay, are these things there? And like proactively looking for like kind of these demonic, inculcated entities, and like really being like, hey, let's get a clean slate. Because we just did a great healing. We don't want one of them little boogeyman hanging out. So that's what this team, it came in a little later, of where I was noticing, like I'll do the clearings and kind of do the warp gates and like kind of reprocessing and checking them and stuff like that. And then noticing like, hey, wait a second, these little wee beasties, they didn't get cleared. So that's what that got in. Then also there's a specialized healing team, and it's kind of like, because you're going back into those chains, and they would normally be created by some type of hurt or some type of fear, or passed down of fear. It's kind of just an extra level of healing and like kind of like gentleness. And it's like living in God's divinity is a part of it, and kind of just getting like kind of almost being held, by Mother God, Father God, like, being held and like little baby, like kind of like having that part, like that tenderness almost there. Also kind of creating a hollow ground of like, now that this has been cleared, let's have it be protected. And like, because especially we're going down to young parts of like, let's reestablish that protection that possibly we didn't have, you know, like how do we reestablish that? Also kind of another looping back of reaping the seeds of change, of like that we are pushing forward into a new change, and know that like there's going to be a bounty caused by that. So it's kind of like reinforcing that like we did a lot of work, and also it's going to be okay, like this is what's coming. Then this is also kind of odd one. It was maximize my digestion, and it's not like my digestion of food, but like how you digest what happened, how you digest energy, because it's not just the food that you eat, which is a form of energy, but just energetically, how are you digesting the food or the energy that's coming in? And that's part of the like kind of getting stuck and like kind of just retuning it up to where if you're able to accept any energy that comes in, right, and not hold on to it and let it pass through, that's kind of like how you digest what shows up. Because if it shows up, unfortunately, it's here. If it's not a happy thing, it's like, well, you got to deal with it. And if you can deal with it with joy and peace and ease, and not feel like, oh, I got to hold on to it for the next 10 years, it's kind of like, oh, whoa, oh, I felt that. Don't want to maybe have that again, but cool, no problem. So that's what that point is. And then also, this one is also increases awareness of like kind of seeing, like we just did a bunch of work, and just seeing that dynamic, the new dynamic that's happening. Because we want to, I mean, what we're building here with the release warp gate and these chains is like we're really getting down to the foundational level, but then we can really blow those away on like more superficial, because it's going to start with your parents and then kind of just replicate the same over and over and over. And once we take out the foundation, everything else starts to fall easier and easier, to where it's just kind of like, oh, I got a chain, boom. You don't even necessarily be doing a clearing. It's just your beingness is now, oh yeah, I don't do those no more. And it just gets thrown away without having to go through the whole process. But that's why this is so important. And this is just the release work when you do it once. So this is what's in it. Just wanted to, I was requested to explain this. So the next one is to just bring love. Like, you know, I love myself. Like this is, you're doing for yourself, and to like rebuild that bond of love for yourself, and like just realize like being of light is a being of love, you know. So love, it's to really pull that in. Also another reinforcement of sending love and kindness to this dynamic, to ourselves, to this work that's being done. And then also it's going to be an inflood of new energy, right? Because this has been locked up, right? So when we start moving, it's an inflood of this new energy and an outflow, and it's to have this happen in our highest good. And we always say, you know, release in our highest good. All these have been built with that statement embedded in every one of these creations has that, in my highest good, in my highest good. That's always like the default mantra, to where whatever's going, it's like it needs to be in our highest good. And this is kind of just another one of directing that energy to make sure, because there's going to be a whole inflood and outflow of energies, and how can we, you know, retune, direct it in our highest good. And then this one, this was kind of an older, well, not an older one, but it like came later, and it's really to direct, to help redirect how you flow your energies and how your energies flows to your highest good. Because like say, like if you had a river with a whole bunch of like rocks in it, it would disrupt the flow of the river. And it's kind of like, now that we pull those out of like, we want to make sure that like, because obviously water relocate and kind of reorientate itself. And it's kind of like we have like if our energy was going up like this, but then kind of deviated because there was this block here, and we remove that block, it's to kind of retrain to like have it flow in its path, like in the path that it's supposed to flow. But this one's here is that it's kind of connecting to heavenly angels, or heavenly or angelic heaven energies, right? And kind of getting the path of like, if you're emanating those, how those for you need to emanate, because you create a whole new dynamic by making this clearing. It's like, how can you remove that energy in like like if it's an angelic energy, kind of get the blueprint for that. Then also like deep space energies, because we are stardust. We all come from stardust and we're going there. And it's kind of like reconnecting that of like, now we're kind of, because we're really multi-dimensional, this goes really, really deep. And it's kind of getting, because we get kind of out of with the limitation. And it's kind of like, once that gets pulled out, we also want to kind of realign with, okay, now I've got this new energy I get to emit. I want to also emit it in a manner which models like the ideal for wherever that happens to be, whether it's an angelic energy, a deep space energy, fairy light energy, also deep earth energies, because we're connected deep into earth. And it's kind of like, oh, if we've got that new connection, because if we start resonating that in like a non-harmonious manner, it just be non-harmonious, versus if you can do it harmonious, and then it aligns with earth, and then it pulls that in, and then earth, it makes, you know, it's kind of like if you add an instrument to an orchestra that's out of tune, you know, it's kind of like, ooh, you know, maybe the music stops, people are like, hey, what are you doing? Versus if you do it in tune, it just adds to the symphony. So that's what this part of the warp gate does. This next is a whole section, and this is kind of like post, we've done all this work, like, you know, I've explained all this stuff that's happening. Now it's kind of like a tune-up for the system. And this is like, the first part is like clearing the chakras, like, and going through all the chakras. But I want to explain a little bit of like what's all happening there. So there's like kind of a whole protocol of like clearing out the chakra, the spin of the chakra, the colors that you use in the various chakras at times, because you might use a certain color to start, and then like to break up the energy, to chop up the energy, and then you do a color to sweep out the energy, and then you do a color to energize the energy, to energize the chakra. Sorry, I think I'm saying energy as opposed to chakra. So it'll be a color for the chakra. For the various chakras are all going to have different colors. There'll be colors that would be good to clean it, and then there's colors that are good to, you know, add energy to it. So it does all those based on the different chakras. It also goes through, cuts any cords that might be connected to this chakra. Now this is going to be happening on, I'll go through the, okay, well actually I'll say those list of chakras after. But it's going through a lot of chakras, and it's going to be doing it at every single age. So this is happening, like, this would be like all the stuff that I've talked about for, I guess, the last 17 minutes now. This would be like at age 1, right? And then it starts again. Well, actually we'll clear age 1 again if there's stuff to pick up, because sometimes you might clear something later that then opens up an avenue where it's, hey, I'm ready to release some more. So it's like, hey, let's go back and get, you know, if there's still stuff on the table, let's do it again. Let's run it again. Because your unconscious mind, like I said, 400,000 bits per second can do, it took me 17 minutes to tell you about this, let alone actually doing it. But your unconscious can do it rapidly faster than do it at all ages. So it's also gonna check your chakra spins, kind of like tune that up, also increase it if it needs to. Recognize and cut all cords that are coming into that chakra. Invoke blessings, you know, kind of like always doing the work sacredly. So this one also like has its own process of invoking blessings and guidance from higher beings. Then there's also kind of like a self-monitoring process to kind of like check to make sure it's doing what it's supposed to be doing and it's not getting off track. Obviously bringing, like, you know, support and harmony and love to the whole process, kind of like flooding that, because we're doing really powerful stuff. But then also a protection. This is part of, not so much part specifically of a shield, but part of the shield warp gate technology of to protect that area of like, hey, we're working in this sacred spot, why we're going to protect it while we're going in and working, because we're kind of changing it up, and it's almost like, in a sense, like making it vulnerable, but not, that's why we're protecting it, or just realizing like, hey, we're going in and do something. Like if it was a surgery, you wouldn't, like, you know, do a surgery in like a downtown subway with all the germs and the dust and the you know, you wouldn't do that. You'd get in a protected environment, do the surgery. And it's kind of like similar, like we're going in, you know, in a protected manner to protect what we're working on, because then once we finish, we then heal it, fill it back up, kind of like, you know, because we pulled out stuff that wasn't supposed to be there, like pulling out a splinter, but then we heal it, you know, and then put a band-aid on it. So it's kind of like that. But then we also do like kind of, this is just for the chakras, also kind of taking that energy and then getting rid of it. Like, you know, the bad energy we've taken is kind of like, it's kind of like the garbage collecting process of like, hey, we've pulled it off, now what do we do with that? Sending it on. And then this is kind of like the lead person that does it. There's also components that I'll talk about, because this is, like I said, really in depth. But just going through the chakras of all the ones that will get cleared in this process is the crown, forehead, ajna, throat, heart, and the ajna would be your third eye. If you're not familiar with that, you'll be your heart, front solar plexus, back solar plexus, navel, back spleen, sex chakra, main, basic chakra, minor head, or the back head minor chakra, the jaw major chakra left and right, the armpit minor chakra left and right, the elbow minor chakra left and right, the hand chakra left and right minor chakra, the hip minor chakra left and right, the knee minor chakra left and right, the soul minor chakra left and right. At every age, through every chakra. Of like, for that specific thing that we cleared, or whatever we passed in, whether it was safe to be safe to feel safe, we're going in and super cleaning all those chakras, all the different parts of the body, which is a little bit related, not related to it. These actually go into the energy centers of the body, versus that very first one I talked about was more into the muscles and where that needs to get cleared out as well. Still moving on. And this is all in the release warp gate when you call it once. And it'll go through all the different ages. So that's like kind of like, that's why when I say it's going to take 4 to 12 hours, is because that's an idea of how much is going on with this. And there's also like, just to go through, like once it's cleaned it, I mean, there's a whole protocol of how many times it cleans and then checks and then cleans and then checks and then kind of, so there's that whole kind of dynamics. There's a lot going on for each one of all those chakras I said, and it's going to do that for each day, I mean each year. There's also a little bit of, I wouldn't say AI, it's the worst word for it, but kind of like a checks and balances to see, okay, we've cleared this, we've cleared that, now let's go back, reset. Is it spinning and doing what it's supposed to do now that the limitations of those limitations we're doing removed, if that makes sense? And then it also alerts if it's not, like kind of saying like, okay, we need to escalate this, and then possibly jump back to, because this is kind of like the cleanup of like, we go through, we've done all the clearings, now we're kind of like clearing up the body, ready to prepare. But if something like kind of the clearing in the chakra alerts of like, hey, this isn't letting go. Like I normally clear it, it hasn't let go, which means there's in the previous stuff that we did, like there's still more that gets done, that needs to get done, of like there's still something holding on. So we go run it back through, so then this piece, you know, can be let go. So there's just kind of like that feedback. But then there's also components to that kind of chakra cleaning team, if that makes sense, to where it's accelerated. It's been, I worked a lot on this one because that's kind of one of the first ones that started, because I was doing the chakra clearing, and like it would take a long time. I mean, like obviously you say, I sit there and I'm clearing. So then I would like make the warp gate, or I started to make the warp gate to do that, and then I would just get into just, oh, like how can I make that even better? And I made some of these devices. Let's see. So this is the team that controls the devices. And then there's also some of the new things that I added of like, for clearing the chakra, there's kind of like the standard protocol, but then this one is like inverting smart light to cancel the non-divine programs. And it's almost like you have a wave of like this non-divine, right? And it's actually gonna do the inversion of it. So have you ever had like noise canceling? It's kind of like that, where it injects that in, and it kind of almost like matter, antimatter, but not in that manner, but it kind of cancels and helps collapse that. So it's just one of the ways in which, if things aren't clearing or cleaning up, it's just a way to amplify that and kind of like, okay, we're going to also send in this in like kind of light inversion energy. And then this is also like another device of like kind of taking the cleaning protocol and then amping it up like with a device that like kind of does like the spinning ultra fast. It also does like kind of the transmutation of the energy and where it can send it, like whether it sends it to the sun, whether it sends it to an angelic gate to be passed to another dimension and processed. It kind of handles that, and it also handles the coloring too, of like being able to rapidly switch so you can rapidly go through all the different chakras and apply the proper colors to the proper chakras. And it's kind of like it's got a built-in way into which, since the warp gate isn't broken down, it was in the past to like different pieces, because I test each one of these pieces, you know, I'm doing all of it, and like it put checks and balances, like you couldn't put the wrong color to the wrong chakra, like it would intervene on that too. So it's kind of like a second check and balance, but that's not all pre-programmed properly, or not properly, but all pre-programmed automatically. So because each piece I could have been like, okay, I want to put in this color, but this would be another step to be like, no, not that color, wrong chakra. It's like, oh, whoops. But now, I mean, obviously the protocol is correct of all the colors being correct, but it's just another level, just because it was an interesting device that I was creating to do that. It was really neat to have it, because it will automatically do the sending to the sun for reprocessing, but also has this cool 5D purifier, which is another thing I kind of discovered, or you take, because 5D is a higher version of 3D. 3D is like a printout of 5D, but you can take a 3D and kind of replicate it up in 5D, but that's going to really, really raise its vibration, and the stuff that can't in the 3D get to 5D kind of falls away, and then you recreate the 3D version, but it's a clean version from 5D. And it's got all the limitation stuff cleared off. So that's kind of a cool way where it kind of pops things into 5D, and the things that can't go to 5D, which are the things you don't want on you, don't get to come. They get like they get detached. So then that can get easily swept away, and then we bring back to the thing. So this is a cool thing that does that. Just one of the things I discovered in my process of running this like 12 hours a day and going a little bit of a mad scientist like that. I wasn't joking. This one's another cool one where it's like that smart light with the inversion process, but it's actually with a divine energy to enhance the divine signature of whatever, like kind of we're clearing. So if we're clearing on a chakra, it's to enhance the divine signature of that chakra. So it adds like a divine resonant light to that to help kind of like, because the chakra's been weighed down with all these limitations, all this stuff that we've brought in with it, and all the generational stuff. And it's kind of a way in which to inject that kind of like that divine like resonance to really kind of help wake it back up to its divine path. So that was just another device that kind of like you could then use all of these devices in parallel while going through the protocol, and each one would introduce like what it does at the same time. So it's just another way to not only accelerate it all the way fast because your unconscious is doing it fast, is to increase what the unconscious could do even faster. So it's just because it's just so cool. So this device is just to really raise the vibration of all the area around. So it kind of makes it easier to make the change when everything, the whole vibration in the area and what's getting utilized or around what you're clearing or what you're clearing out, and like kind of boost the vibration of that, to like raise that up to where it just makes all of that clearing easier. It's kind of like, I'm trying to think what the best analogy of that, of like, say if you're working and it's not dark, but it's kind of like that, of like turning a bright light to everything. It's where you can just see everything real crystal clear, right? It's all, you raise the vibration, so what's not of a high vibration kind of stands out, or like, oh yeah, yep. So it's kind of to do that, to make it easier to clear out the parts that are supposed to be cleared out. I'm not sure why this one came in relatively in the middle, I should say, but this was really in the beginning, and this is to loop back and clear all the different components. So it's kind of like in a surgery, like to clean like the scalpel, it like goes back and cleans all the processes, all the various devices or techniques, and like kind of retune them to source and re-clean them, and like even after they've been run and then re-clean, and kind of, it's like, it's one to maintain them, but also to kind of self-correct and self-clean the processes of their own, and kind of keep them, you know, obviously you want to be on track to source as much as possible. And the more that these get used, the more kind of like we're bringing that divine information into it. And this is what this team is to do, is to really just keep on like upgrading the warp gate. That's like how can it self-correct and work smoother. That's what this team is. And it's kind of like just a clean, you know, it's just to go back, make sure what we're doing is clean, like we're using clean tools. That's really what this one's for. And that's, I mean, that was the last one explained, but that was actually in the middle. That came on pretty soon, of like that kind of self-cleaning, because I would have to go and clean and like take, and I was like, wait a sec, let's get a warp gate that's just automatic. Like when we run it, we're cleaning. We're, you know, kind of like, you know, you use a fork and then you clean it, you know, like that. So that's kind of the overview, I would say, what's in the release warp gate. So I hope you get the idea of how much is in there. I mean, these are just like kind of the bullet points, not really all what's happening, but know that your unconscious goes and follows it, always in your highest good. And it does it, like when the big thing is doing it at each age. So like that whole process that I explained, which is about 30 minutes now, would happen at each one of your ages. So obviously unconsciously will run that a lot faster. But it's also longer than what I said, because some of these things you loop through like 9 times, and that's for one direction, and then the other direction 9 times, and then for all the different colors that you're going to do through another 9 times. Like, so there's a lot going on. And don't worry, your unconscious mind is super, super fast. You didn't ever have to even watch this video to know all what it's doing, because it's all happening in your unconscious. And it's really just so you start waking up. I mean, even though this is a lot of stuff that's getting done, you're able to do it all, you know, without even knowing, like without even me telling you what this is, you're still able to do it. Your unconscious is able to process it, know what it is, do it, because it's got all the divine signatures to know what's happening. I'm like, oh yeah, we're pulling that out. I'm on board. I like it. I want it. So but I know I was requested to like explain what's in the release warp gate. And that's just one of them. I've got a bunch. So, and a lot of them, most of them, like most of the ones at least that I release, are kind of like this in depth, because I kind of want to pack a lot together to where instead of you are knowing, you know, 500 warp gates and then having to do each individual, I want these kind of like bundled and then also directed at like the biggest bang for your buck, because I want to have it take as least amount of time for you and do the most amount of work possible, because I've overstacked it to where it just kind of fizzles out. So these are kind of as most tuned as it is now, and I'll also continue to retune them, because as the energy of the planet increases, what can be put in a warp gate, I'm expecting, is also going to increase. And also, the more people we get connected doing warp gates, it only amplifies out what a warp gate can do. And one of the big things, like kind of the whole divine path of this, is to get, I mean, a million, it's not necessarily exactly a million, but a million people that run a warp gate can create 100 monkey syndrome, where we all get it. We all just remember, because we're just remembering back to the way we really function. And it's kind of, if we get enough people running warp gates and have run warp gates, we're going to get to that like kind of tipping point, which is going to be a lot smaller than the population, to where everybody wakes up and they're like, oh yeah, energetic chains, nah, that's not for me. And we all release them, and that's where we get like this quantum, huge heaven on earth change on the planet. And you're leading it. You're part of the Vanguard. So thank you so much for running the warp gate and getting free, because you're not just helping you, you're going to help everybody. And until we talk again, have a blessed day or a blessed night.